Yes, one of the main objectives of this session is to, to raise and discuss new questions that we would want to see as the part of the salutogenesis family, new questions to be addressed by salutogenesis. And secondly, also explore applications of salutogenesis beyond health. As you're rightfully aware, as I mentioned earlier, that the theme of this conference, of this pre-conference, is salutogenesis beyond health. So we want to see what else we could explore to advance both theory and practice of salutogenesis. And we hope that at the end of this session, we would have a clear understanding and hopefully more consensus on the next steps regarding what is needed to be explored in terms of research as well as in practice. And lastly, but not least, we hope that the salutogenesis family would grow in terms of numbers and quality. Our agenda, Georg, our agenda. Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, we have a plenary as well as breakout sessions. I provide the introductory remarks, and in a short while, Georg will be presenting an introduction to salutogenesis before we will be moving out into sessions. But before the sessions, we'll also have a brief summary, kind of like a teaser, an appetizer of what will happen in each of the breakout rooms. So we will encourage all our participants, because we're planning to have 2 breakout sessions for discussion. So we'll encourage you to sign up for one at the beginning, and then when we return, after that one, you'll also sign up for another. We're encouraging you to explore a bit more. Although it's not prescriptive, you can choose to remain in the same breakout room, but we hope that you'll consider exploring alternative rooms as part of the second session. I don't want to go into the details as they're presented on the screen, but then so thereafter, after the breakout rooms sessions, we'll be returning to the plenary, where we would have a brief. This is going to really be interesting from Shifra. It's responding to a question about what Antonovsky would say today if he were here. And thereafter we'll close, and we hope that, well, we would have achieved the outcomes at the end of this session. And so moving on, the sessions, we have 5 themes for the breakout sessions. The first, presented by Eddie and Shifra, is one on interrelations between individual and collective sense of coherence in times of crisis. The second, led by Claudia, Ruca, and Mathieu, is applying salutogenesis to advance coherent societies. While the third, this would be moderated by Bengt, Lenneke, and Laura. This is Genesis of Salutogenesis in the Beginning of Life. While the fourth, presented by Georg and Shefaly, that is Health Beyond Ease and the Individual. While last but not least, Marguerite, Eva, and Louis will lead a discussion on salutogenesis guiding health promotion action. So thank you very much. We hope that we'll have a productive session today, and hopefully, as we grow the society of salutogenesis beyond what we currently have, those that have not been part of this would join us so that we can grow the body of knowledge around salutogenesis. Now I'm proudly happy to present, to lead you on to the next session by Georg, who will be taking us through an introduction to salutogenesis. Over. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Pauline, for this nice introduction to our meeting. Now, in my role as the chair of Global Working Group of Salutogenesis, I would like to take this opportunity to give a short introduction to salutogenesis. As we have seen in this poll, we have a quite normal distribution of participants. Even 1/3 is really rather new to the field, so please hang on. But I also give some background information first, because then in the second part of my short intro, I will also show how we think we should advance salutogenesis in the future. In a nutshell, you find this definition of WHO, which we provided to this group, that salutogenesis really is about the study of the origins, the genesis of health, in Latin salus, and this is exactly the word salutogenesis, the origin of health rather than disease. And as you see here, it describes how social and individual resources, including the sense of coherence, help people to manage stress and to thrive. So that's in short our definition of salutogenesis. So where is it coming from? Most of you certainly will know that the original author of this concept has been Aaron Antonovsky. He has really written two seminal books who were introducing this idea and developing it really deeply in these books. And again, the first big contribution is really this new question of what is the origin of health rather than disease. And in addition to this question, which is certainly a very intriguing question, he also really provided us with this, I think, very clear term of salutogenesis, really making it very clear that it is a mirror concept really towards pathogenesis. And in a nutshell, again, I mean, I can only summarize two books here. Instead of risk factors, he really suggested to balance on life stressors and resources at the same time, which help us to really deal with these life stressors. And instead of, as pathogenesis does, looking at single disease outcomes, he really suggested to look broadly at the overall development of health of a human being over the life course, but also in a certain period of time. And he proposed this disease as a continuum. So that's in a nutshell the original idea of Antonovsky. And as we now already have seen at the very core, certainly in his theory, he proposed this sense of coherence. Basically, he said, based on his own research he had conducted, he really found out that this concept of this global orientation to life of human beings is really the core to really moving more to the ease end of the disease continuum. And as you probably all know, it has these three dimensions conceptually, at least, this comprehensibility, more the cognitive side, that I can find some order and predictivity, or can predict what is happening around me. Then the manageability, that I find appropriate resources to deal with stresses. And last not least, I find some deeper meaning about what is going on in my life. And he did not only provide us with this idea, with this concept of sense of coherence, but also with a respective measure, the sense of coherence scale, which has been translated in over 50 languages actually by now, and really has a strong evidence when we look at the broad body of literature that it's really very protective and promotive for our health. So that's basically in the essence what he had been developing and offering to us. Meanwhile, certainly this field has grown a lot. This is reflected in the second handbook of salutogenesis with around 600 pages, where you can see all these developments. In the introductory chapter, Maurice and I summarize that really meanwhile salutogenesis has taken on three distinct meanings. On the other hand, this more overall positive orientation really taken up in health promotion, particularly really focusing on resources in the environment of people, which will lead to well-being as a positive outcome. Certainly the sense of coherence as one core element. And then we shouldn't forget that really Antonovsky had been developing this huge complex theory, which is depicted here with all its complex relationships, because he was very much following a systems perspective, how health develops. And probably this model really hasn't been taken up so much because it is so complex. And this is why other people already proposed to really simplify this model, which is depicted here. You see all this circularity is really reduced to one horizontal arrow, which is the idea is that all these elements here on the slide are interconnected. At the core, there's still certainly the sense of coherence, my orientation towards life. When I have a strong sense of coherence, then on the very left-hand side, in diverse life situations, I will reassess stresses as something I can deal with. I will be able to identify and also use the key resistance resources to deal with the stressors. And by doing so, I will have this life experience where my life is perceived or provides me some consistency. I will have this load balance between stressors and with resources which help me to deal with this stresses, so they are in a balance. And I won't feel as a passive human being, but really as an actor who can participate actively and really deal with these life situations in a proactive way. And by that, by this life experience, I again will strengthen my sense of coherence, and we can imagine this kind of even upward gain cycles where the stronger shock really leads to more consistent life experiences, and that in the end will certainly also contribute that I move more towards the ease end of this ease disease continuum. So by that, we now have an overview of this model. Then we, as a global working group, think that also this model could be even improved, because originally Antonovsky was really perceiving this ease and more in a negatively defined way as an absence of pain, functional limitation, and so on. So I think here we could add more a positive dimension of health. On the left-hand side, resources are certainly key, but resources do not only help us to resist negative things, but also to perceive life as something positive that I can grow and develop and find my own purpose and achieve my life goals. So there should be something like thriving resources. And last but not least, many have really certainly focused on the sense of coherence as the essence of the model. But because the sense of coherence is really primarily an orientation, a perception, a personal resource, that might be a little bit too limited when we really think about the creation of health in a more comprehensive way, think about coherent societies, what we want to reflect on. So this is why I proposed this completed salutogenic model of health, which just on the left-hand side would add to the resistance resources with a core idea that there are also, in addition, thriving resources, which on the right-hand side would not only move us up to the way of ease, but even beyond ease, in the sense that I perceive something positive, this purpose of life, my life goals, and so on. And in the center, maybe we could, in addition, I'm not saying we should throw out sense of coherence at all, but in addition, we could maybe focus more heavily in our research and practice of really creating coherent life experiences, which then certainly would also increase sense of coherence. And with that, I'm at the end. Why did we choose this topic of our conference, pre-conference today, beyond health and towards coherent societies? Exactly because we have huge challenges about conflicts, migration, planetary health, and so on. And that all can only be really addressed well when we look beyond health of the individual, move it up on the very left-hand side to the planet, understood as a complex system of unity in diversity. I really love that term, which has been created by Sione Tuetai from the IUHPE Global Working Group on Planetary Health, really a complex system of unity in diversity. And for that, we really need this more coherent life experiences, and I added here equitable coherent life experience on all these different levels, which would really lead to more holistic, balanced, negotiated outcomes. That's what we would like to discuss with you today. And with that, I move on to my colleagues. So the first group who will introduce now what they would like to discuss with you is Adi and Shifra.
Thank you.
Adi,
thank you very much, Georg. Thank you for your introduction about salutogenesis and sense of coherence. In 5 minutes, it's not so easy to do it. Our team is Adi and me. We are coming from Ben-Gurion University, from the university where Aaron Antonovsky developed his new paradigm, I would say, the salutogenesis. And what we would present here is about moving from the individual to the collective coping resource of the sense of coherence. So Antonovsky model originally, and especially its core concept of the sense of coherence, focuses on the ability of individuals to deal with stressors in life and stay healthy. The sense of coherence of the individual contributes to successful coping and as a result to emotional and physical health. This is the main assumption, main hypothesis of the salutogenesis. And findings from all over the world during the past 40 years have indeed confirmed this basic hypothesis of the salutogenic model with regard to the individual. But what we ask now is, can we transform an individual concept into a collective measure? Does it make any sense to speak of a collective as perceiving the world as coherent? At the philosophical level, the question is, does a collective, a community, a war group, an ethnic group, a nation have a mind which perceives? This question has challenged me while I was a doctoral student, and my unique, wise, and inspiring mentor was Professor Aaron Antonovsky, many years ago, I must admit. I was a family therapist and wondered whether his research proposal, it was the first research proposal, large scale, about retirees' sense of coherence and their health, was the best way to understand the transition in life of retirement. So I cautiously told him when he asked my opinion about this proposal, and said to him, I think you are wrong when you are investigating the individual retirees. It is the family system who retires. Then, a year later, while Aaron was on a sabbatical in Sweden, I had a stimulating, irritating, and mostly inspiring discussion with him, but it was by regular mails, there was all days. And we discussed this philosophical question of what is collective sense of coherence, and does this concept has any meaning at all? His questions were very hard, and I want you to hear them. My main theoretical, it was, is there any meaning to the collective sense of coherence? And if there is, where it is located, where do you put it? So my main, I will not go into, we have very few minutes. So my main theoretical contention, as you can see in the slide, was that the individual sees the world as coherent is as much an abstraction from whatever objective reality maybe, as is the phrase, the family, the community, or the nation sees the world as coherent. At last, the results of my doctoral studies on the family sense of coherence that showed that the family sense of coherence was a better predictor of the retiree's health, convinced my mentor. Since then, the idea that the sense of coherence concept could be broadened to collective levels rather than individuals had been studied extensively. Research has revealed the contribution of sense of coherence at the family, community, and national levels on individuals' well-being and on their ability to face crises and difficulties in life. However, the question of measurement or how the collective sense of coherence can be measured is still open. Actually, I believe we are still at a stage that does not enable a satisfactory operational translation of a complex collective concept like community or national sense of coherence. Another important question that I would like to raise here is that the salutogenic research over almost 4 decades focused mainly on the relationships between sense of coherence and health, while other social concepts have been mostly neglected. It's not the case now. In our chapter in the handbook, Adi and I claim that broadening the concept of sense of coherence from the individual to the collective level should be followed by altering the previous salutogenic research question from focusing only on health issues to considering social concept as well. So I'm glad that this meeting indeed deals with salutogenesis beyond health. When we employ such an approach, the salutogenic question would not only be who copes successfully and stays healthy, but also, for example, who expresses more openness to the other, who is a social activist, who pursues justice in the world, or who will be a peacemaker in this world. These salutogenic questions are very meaningful, of course, in our violent, conflictual world. And now, Adi, your turn. Continue.
Okay. So during the last 10 years, we at the Martin Springer Center for Conflict Studies explored sense of coherence at the community and national level in different social contexts, various conflict, global and local crises. We mainly focus on 2 questions. What is the contribution of sense of coherence at the collective level to health? And what is the role of sense of coherence at the community and national level in intergroup conflict? Since I have very limited time, so I just mentioned that sense of coherence at the individual level was a main and stable coping resource during COVID-19, unrelated to grouping factors, and sense of national coherence was an unstable coping resource and decreased a long time. And this coping resource was available only to specific groups. And also in the context of intergroup conflict, sense of coherence at the community and national level were found to be related to less openness to the out-group and more clinging to the in-group. So in our breakout room, we would like to discuss the following questions and share with you the results of our studies, and we hope to see you there.
And open to questions from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think with that we can move on to the second topic, which would be this group of applying salutogenesis to advanced coherent societies. Who speaks? Ruca? Claudia?
Sorry, I think I'm the one to introduce our working group. Hello, everyone. My name is Ruca Maas, and I'm speaking to you from Trondheim in Norway. Yeah, our working group wants to look at if we can apply salutogenesis onto higher levels as settings and societies, mostly societies. And this is in line with what Shifra just talked about. I was very much intrigued by what Shifra and Heidi said. So now I just have to reshape my head a little bit. But what we want to do is that we start with a concept of sense of coherence, as has been described here before. But we want to look at the sense of coherence and how it is developed in an interplay with the societal resources, values, and norms that every individual finds in their surroundings. To do so, we have looked a little bit into the books and the original theory, which actually says that the SOC is developed through experiences with societal structures. And these experiences will also be influenced by who you are. So me and my brother, we won't make the same kind of experience with the same structures, even if we share a lot of personal or identity values. So how coherent our societies are and appear would depend on your identity and your status in this society. So what we want to look is into how can we create coherent structures and processes to facilitate for coherent experiences for diverse members of societies, and try to kind of unravel how can a society facilitate for all its members to have experiences that are characterized by consistent information, opportunities to give feedback, experience load balance, and to participate in shaping this society, of which we all are part of. And we also want to try to start discussing how can these coherent experiences be translated into coherent coping strategies, or also strategies for thriving and living a good life, and maybe also for driving society development in a salutogenic way.
Yes,
so we had, yeah, sorry, Claudia, please.
Sorry, I thought that it was my turn.
Yeah, I wanted to introduce you.
Okay. So, and we will do this using examples where we already have starting points of this development. My name is Claudia Meier Magistretti. I'm also a member of the Global Working Group of Salutogenesis, and I'm also Vice Chair of the Global Working Group Vayora, Planetary Health and Well-Being. So I link the two topics. And what we observe is that in planetary health, local activist groups already start this process of creating coherent processes and structures for people when we face an overwhelming problem. At the local level, they make globally overwhelming problems like climate change or the extinction of plants and animals comprehensible, and they make them manageable by putting into action local solutions to address these global problems. And they give these threats also a local significance and motivate people to work together for change. And often, very often, they create new communities in this topic of people who were not linked before, also including marginalized people. So they have a double social and health-oriented way to create coherence, because we know that activism in planetary health helps improve the health of the people they work with and of the activists themselves. Yes, we in the People Planet Health project, we united a whole lot of projects of activist groups into a group, and together we wrote a position paper to inform WHO policies in a novel process of global participation, with the result that WHO invited these activist groups and the project to form a sounding board that will further try to make processes and structures coherent for the experience of people and meaningful ways for coping with catastrophes like the planetary health catastrophe is one. Please, Mathieu.
Thanks, Claudia. Another example of the importance of salutogenesis to build coherent societies is the example of the COVID-19 pandemics. During an emergency such as the COVID pandemic or any other emergency, the interplay between communication strategies and media discourses generates psychosocial impact on mental health, especially in a context where there is an unprecedented volume of media dissemination and consumption. With the evolution of the pandemic, fear has permeated societies, exacerbating social tensions and especially affecting marginalized populations. And while fear may stimulate preventive behaviors, extreme fear can also lead to psychological or behavioral outcomes and inadequate political responses. But what we look at was that societies with better mental health outcomes were also societies with people with higher level of sense of coherence. One study that I undertook with colleagues had identified various risk and protective factors associated with generalized anxiety and depressive symptoms during the pandemic. And of all the factors studied, the SOC, the sense of coherence, was by far the protective factor, which was the most strongly linked with less symptoms of anxiety and depression in times of pandemic. This was a significant result in a sample of 8,800 adults in 8 countries from 4 continents around the world. So in conclusion, I think to advance with societies who better cope with public health emergencies or any emergencies at all, we must build societies with higher sense of coherence. So that was my pitch.
And these are the questions we are going to talk about. First, we will talk about your questions, of course, in the breakout room, and then I give over to the next group.
Okay, then it's our group, isn't it?
Definitely, yes, Lenneke.
Okay, so, go Bengt, go. It's your turn to show what we're doing in our workshop.
Okay, don't be so wild now, little children. Peacefully. We are going to talk about how the salutogenic process starts in life, and focusing on the beginning of life. When I talked to Aaron Antonovsky years ago, he said he doesn't know anything about children. And if you think about where and when this was developed in a life stage, it was developed among middle-aged women still fertile who are moving on to not being fertile. And that leaves the spectrum. How does this process begin at all in your life? I put on my salutogenic sort of glasses to have a look at that. And there are, of course, many thoughts and theories from the beginning of life. And we will try to show this to you, and mainly getting you to reflect into this. We are going to use a short documentary documentary video from a person who actually was in a very severe situation, a mother who actually didn't get the chance to have her child because she was in Auschwitz, and Dr. Mengele stopped the life of that child. And you are going to see this and start to think about how does this actually start in my life by going back to see at your first memories. And we are going to have a special way of doing this. You will have to think and of your own experience to get this going. And Lenneke, Vaandrager, and Laura Bouwman, both actually from Holland, from the Netherlands, are the ones who will sort of frame this to you. And I hope you will have an exciting and wonderful sort of moment with us. This is all I want to say. Lenneke and Laura, please,
Yeah,
if you
just
want to
to
compliment.
add, my name is Lenneke Vaandrager. I'm from Wageningen University in the Netherlands. And for me, I have to learn by experience. And we want to take you through an experience today where you can also think about your own life situation. Laura.
Yes, Laura here, also from Wageningen University, the Netherlands, but speaking to you from the south of France. It's beautiful, beautiful weather in here. And I just want to share with you that also this place where I am now goes way back to my childhood memories and makes me really feel very, very special. And this way of reflecting on our childhood memories, I'm very much looking forward to do that with you.
Okay,
Good.
over to the next.
Okay, that would be me. Together with Shefaly Shorey, we will introduce you to this topic 4, health beyond ease and the individual. Now I just would like to justify why it's, I think, important to ask this question. As you probably know, Antonovsky really always started with basic assumptions in his thinking and writing that we are all living in a dangerous river of life. So I was always a little bit, let's say, irritated by this statement, because I thought, well, that's certainly true for certain situations in my life and also others' life, but probably it's not well capturing the full life experience. Particularly when we look into even the fields and practice of health promotion, when you know health promotion is really about focusing on resources and promoting positive health outcomes. It's already in the definition of the IUHPE Charter that health is a positive concept, emphasizing social and personal resources. So it sounds a little bit different than a dangerous river of life. When we even look at this idea of settings, our everyday life, the places where we learn, like now, work, where you also work a lot, where you play and even love, would you describe this is all and always a dangerous river of life? I would have huge question marks. So that was always my own personal expression. So I thought, yeah, why couldn't we just ask people? So we had this opportunity of conducting a huge study just the end of last year, actually, still in COVID times, 18,000 employees, 35 countries. And there I just added this one single item question. Do you perceive your life rather, like here on the left-hand side, as swimming in a river full of danger and I fight for survival? Or on the 7-point Likert scale on the right-hand side, my life is like swimming in a river full of enrichment and I thrive in it. And here you see the results about across 18,000 people from 35 countries. And you see 80% are either in the middle or more towards the right-hand side of this thriving river, and only 20% are really scale value 1 to 3, and even only 2.8% are really saying I'm fully and only in this dangerous river of life. So I'm not saying that we should dismiss this idea that often we are also certainly struggling for survival, but that should be complemented by this positive notion of life, that there are also very positive aspects. And just to let you know, the lowest value we found across these 35 countries, which really cover all, actually all regions of the world, was 70% of this in the screen level. So it's really something in all countries can be experienced as very positive our life. And this is exactly, I think, an argument for this completed salutogenic model. which I had shown before. And during my sub-session, I would like to show you a specific example and how also when we look not only at positive health, but also beyond the individual, how a positive, healthy organization could look like, how we could define that. And that are the two questions, Shefaly, I would like to discuss with you. How would you define and apply positive health in your own research or practice? And secondly, if you think there's something like positive health and something like health beyond even the individual, how would you look at that, at health as more a systemic entity also of societies, organizations, and so on? Looking forward to our discussions.
Yes, so the fifth topic is salutogenesis guiding health promotion action. And I'm Marguerite Daniel from Bergen in Norway, and Eva Langeland is also here in Bergen in Norway, and Luis is in Portugal, and the three of us will run this session. Next slide, please. So Antonovsky, in the last paper that he produced, 1996, suggested to the health promotion world that the salutogenic model of health, or salutogenesis, is a theory that could guide health promotion. But the trouble is, when you start looking at how Antonovsky defines health compared to how health promotion defines health, there's a huge big rift. So health promotion uses the World Health Organization definition of health, which is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And Antonovsky thought this was absurd. How can you have complete physical, mental, and social well-being? And he said instead, and Georg, just one more click because there's a continuum, thank you. So he said instead that health is more like a continuum. And on the one hand, you've got dis-ease and breakdown, but on the other hand, you've got ease and health. And that we normally fall somewhere along here, and some things shift us towards the ease end, and other things shift us towards the dis-ease end or breakdown. Next slide, please. So because of this big discrepancy in definitions of health, when we look at how can the salutogenic model of health or salutogenesis link with health promotion, what we're going to do is we're going to link it with different health promotion action areas. So in the Ottawa Charter, there are 5 action areas that are named, and I've listed them there on the left-hand side. Building healthy public policy, creating supportive environments, strengthening community action, developing personal skills, and reorienting health services. So if we then look at those action areas in the light of the key concepts in salutogenesis, which Georg introduced us to right at the beginning, and in particular, we want to look at generalized or specific resistance resources, so the resources that help us resist stress, but also the dimensions of the sense of coherence, comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. How do these things link? And next slide, thanks, George. What we're going to do in our session is we've divided it up into 3 times 15 minutes, and each one of us is going to present very shortly some research that we've been involved in that links these two, some aspect of salutogenesis or its dimensions, and one of the particular health promotion action areas, or even more than one. And then we really want to, so the idea is to stimulate questions within you and get you to discuss. And so we really hope it's going to be a very interactive discussion and sharing of research that people have done in these areas. Thank you. Over, Georg. Georg.
Okay, so thanks a lot for all these introductions. Not surprisingly, because all of us are quite excited about our topics. We are 10 minutes over what the time we actually had aimed for. So this is why I suggest we now reduce just the breakout room times each time by 5 minutes. So we just make that here 5 minutes longer. So we will start with this break at 16:40. Now, please choose one of the topics for now. And as Pauline had said, after the break, then you can join another topic to go into these discussions which have been offered by the groups and do so we take a 5-minute break now. So in 5 minutes, we will start at 55 instead, as we indicated at 45. So at 15:55, please be in your rooms, and we start with discussions. And then we go again into these rooms at 16:50. 16:50, yeah, 16:50, please, again in these other rooms. We thought I still make a short introduction, but then we really would like to engage in discussion with you about these ideas I had presented. And for the first part, I will just share my slides again. I hope that are the right ones.
Yeah, we can see. It's a slideshow. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. I mean, that I already presented in the plenary before. And again, I also heard now certainly that you, many of you work in very diverse groups with different target groups, subpopulations. Many of you work, but also work in this kind of everyday life settings in higher education and so on. And so my question to you now would be, were you surprised when you saw this finding that looking at our life really as always being in this dangerous river of life might be a little bit one-sided, and that we really should complement that also by this more positive picture of life, that in addition we often are also in this resourceful river of life where we can be really full of enrichment and thrive in this river. So very surprised by this share of 80% being more on this positive side and 20% more only in this dangerous river of life. Does that resonate with you?
If you're surprised, maybe you want to give us a thumbs up. If you're not surprised, then you don't have to show any reaction.
So most of you would expected it like that. So you can follow my argument that it would be good to balance this first research question of Antonovsky a little bit and expand it, which I will now show on the next slide. As you all know, he was very much interested in this origin of health, defined as this East disease continuum, in this very stressful, dangerous river of life. And when certainly you look at life in such a negative only way, then the only thing you can do really equip the swimmer to become more strong and have a strong sense of coherence to survive this deadly or dangerous river. I think that's still certainly an important approach, but still I would like to add the second research question, what is the origin of positive health in a more resourceful environment where I can joyful and purposeful swim in this river of life, which certainly would move much more to trying to provide this resource-rich environment instead of only make or increasing the fitness of the individual swimmer. You would rather try to improve the river, the living conditions for everyone. Does it make sense? I think when we look into psychology, then it's very clear that there are two systems always parallel going on within us. On the one hand, this kind of surviving system where we want to avoid negative feelings, negative experiences, and negative parts in our life, and we want to reproduce ourselves safely, really survive well, and maybe even pass on to next generations. But beyond that, there's also always beside in human beings, which really is about exploration. We want to learn new stuff, meet new people, make new types of experiences, really grow personally, and last but not least, really achieve our personal goals in our life. And I think both is within us, and I think in this WHO definition, that's already quite nicely contained, which really defines mental health here as a well-being in which a person, individual, in which every individual realizes his or her own potential. The person can cope with the normal stresses of life and can work productively and fruitfully. And last but not least, even beyond the person, we can make a contribution to society. And I think that all resonates well with this well-known positive concepts in positive psychology, positive health of Seligman, with PERMA dimensions, or the basic psychological needs of autonomy, belonging, competence. I think that's really, I think a very good argument that we can actually talk about positive health as being more than just being at ease as Antonovsky originally proposed. This is why I am proposing this completed salutogenic model, where we just on the left-hand side would not only talk about resistance resources. Certainly we need sometimes resources to overcome, resist negative things in our life, absolutely important. But in addition, we should really also strengthen thriving resources which would allow people to make positive life experiences and also to achieve their meaning and purpose in life, which would then certainly require on the right-hand side of this model to also add positive health and thriving as a desired outcome. Now I promised also to apply that to a healthy organization. We have been doing intervention research in organizations, particularly around psychosocial working conditions for a long time. And we found when we really want to create this kind of coherent life experience in companies, in work sites, then we need to have a very consistent story, a nice, plausible, clear narrative for employees, what we want to achieve together with employees to improve the working situation. And this narrative is really very well functioning when we talk about this desired balance between job demands and job resources, as suggested by the JDR theory by Bakker, Shefaly, and others. So this kind of balance, I think, resonates very well to people because everyone experiences these two phases of work. On the one hand, this over-demanding things which let us being stressed and can even lead to burnout. And on the other hand, with resourceful aspects in the working environment, such as being having some autonomy, having an interesting job, having positive feedback from your peers and supervisors. And so this balance, I think, is very easy to comprehend and a very attractive goal. And last but not least, what do you want to achieve when you work? You want to have personal meaning, and ideally there is an organization which has a clearly defined purpose where you can contribute to this overarching purpose of your organization. And research really shows when companies do well in defining a purpose which is really attractive to the employees together with employees, then they are much more likely identifying with this purpose of the organization and find personal meaning. So that's an example how we can move this concept of health really to a collective or even systemic level of an organization, which is offering this balance and meaning to their members. So that's it from my input side. So maybe you have questions on that, or actually I hand over to Shefaly, who's our great moderator.
No, yeah, thank you, Georg. Excellent presentation as usual. Questions, please. Do you have any questions?
I do have a brief one. You mentioned that, or going back to these 80 versus 20%, we all have these lay concepts of health, and people who are working, and you switch to that later on, were in this kind of fit situation between their context in which they're working and that they feel well there. How do we ensure that there is no inequity, that certain settings are created in a way that certain people feel well there and others are automatically excluded, but in the end all would report that they fit into their specific context?
I mean, that's a very important point in the slide I showed this afternoon. In the beginning, I also added this kind of equity idea that coherent life experience should be really distributed in an equitable way. And I fully agree, particularly in organizations, higher up you are in the hierarchy, as better educated, you tend to have much better working conditions. I absolutely fully agree. How to overcome when you really include all employees across all different hierarchies in doing this kind of what we always do, workshops, where employees can talk about the most painful demands they would like to reduce and which resources are most important to them to survive the working life and also to have a positive work experience. So you would need to include all people that they can equally participate in this kind of improvement process.
Yes, Irma, you have a question?
Yes, it's it's a kind of, it's not a question, but a reflection. In my PhD, I made health promotion intervention in village to reduce brucellosis. And I measure the sense of coherence. I found that in the village with the worse, with the high levels of brucellosis, the sense of coherence is low. You see, and when I ask who is the responsibility to prevent brucellosis, most of that people says is the government. And it was very interesting, this point.
Okay, and what would you conclude out of that finding? So how could you then intervene in the groups which have this lower sense of coherence and with higher level of infections?
Sorry, can you repeat?
What are you doing with this result now? So how can you support those people with this low sense of coherence who have higher health problems?
I think we may, and that's what I've done, a tailored interventions, not one fits all, but tailored interventions, and put them thinking about what is the disease. So increase the comprehension of the problems, and also the trust on the public measures, something like that. Sorry, I'm not English spoken.
No, we understood you very well, Irma, and a great reflection. Maybe we move because there are a few hands up, and if you have other questions, you can ask later, yeah, Irma? And thanks for your reflection. Over to you, David.
Georg, the biggest challenge facing people, and when they would need a strong sense of coherence, is discontinuity of change, such as the pandemic, such as it's okay looking at whether employment, but what happens when that employment is withdrawn? So that's when that strong sense of coherence is needed. And I wondered what research there was in that particular area.
I mean, now you are referring to something, I mean, the whole point is that people vary in the degree of the sense of coherence they have. And it's not really possible in the short run to change their level of sense of coherence. So the only thing what you can really do is to try to build an environment where people find again more resources to deal with these challenges. So I mean, there have been probably interventions, I'm not really was involved in that, but where people who lost their job or really the amount of employment was reduced, then it would be very important to bring these people together and at least to support each other so they would not completely lose the social network they had before in their employment. I mean, well, there are certainly, yeah.
Sorry. Hypothetically, let's say that there is some curriculum that could be designed to enable a strong sense of coherence. And of course, there will be challenges to that along the way because it's a homeoretic model rather than a homeostatic model. It's one that people have to move with the changes and accommodate them as they go along. And I'm just wondering how you can build that into the meaning making so that people can move more smoothly. I'm sorry if I'm wording this question crudely, but yeah.
I mean, we can also ask others in a minute, but I mean, again, for meaning making, we know also from the salutogenic theory that's a key strategy to increase meaning is really to involve people to address their own situation and really to make meaningful decisions which around for the life circumstances they face. So as we heard from Irma before, with people who have this low sense of coherence and do not deal well with this disease in their villages, from my point of view, the strategy would be some community organizing fair in order to find out what are the hindrances, what is impeding them to deal better with this kind of disease in their village. Because again, you cannot boost the sense of coherence directly so fast. I mean, there are some trainings which also show some effectiveness, but that's more a long-term strategy, I would say. I think it's much more meaningful and powerful to bring people together to address their life situation in order to boost the resources which help them to better deal with challenging situations or also achieving their positive goals.
Thank you. Gwendolyn?
Yes, thank you. I was wondering what you think about the fact that in my research, I work with higher education students and secondary school students. And what we found was that the way they look at their environment and the assets and resources they have in their environment and how they understand them, how they employ them, what makes them meaningful is very different for each student and is also fluid in the sense that in a certain situation or at another specific moment, they consider them differently. So we work with a group as a kind of a community, like you in organizational terms, work with organizations and people working in organizations. And I was wondering how you address the fact that you want to work with them as a group, but still want to acknowledge their differences in appreciating resources and different meanings that you can give to certain circumstances or resources or assets they have.
Absolutely. I mean, on the one level, as you also already said, I think it's already very powerful when people, employees, or in your case, students, just come together and share their different approaches, how they deal with difficult situations, but also how they achieve, for example, their goals at work or achieving good success in studying. Because just by this exchange, already you get some more social connectedness, cohesion, which is a very important resource. But you also can learn and get new ideas from others, how they deal with different situations differently. And already, as we all know, continuous learning is also a key element of salutogenic theory. So you also boost this individual learning with very tailored strategies by hearing how others do. So I think that would be my collective answer. I mean, on the collective level. And on the individual level, particularly in our field of occupational health psychology, this concept of crafting is very much on vogue. Crafting is a concept which means that people are empowered to proactively shape their meaningful roles. And this crafting has been applied very successfully to the so-called job crafting. So I very purposefully decide what is important for me at work and what demands do I want to reduce and which resources do I want to need and want to boost in order to have a good working life. So it's a very tailored approach for the individual, and the agency is completely in the individual. And the same concept has been developed for off-job crafting, how I craft my private life around basic needs, Rama needs. It's called detachment, relaxation, autonomy, manageability, meaningfulness, and affiliation. That are the 6 needs you aim for within this off-job crafting domain. And I think it's a highly tailored approach, very much along the line of salutogenesis, because it's very much focusing on resources and the needs, the positive outcomes you would like to pursue. I just don't like the concept as a standalone concept, because it puts all responsibility only on the individual. This is why I don't like it. But if it's combined with this collective approach, when people would come together and share how they craft individually their working life, their off-job life, then it becomes very powerful.
Excellent, thank you. And before we go to you, Julia, I know your hand is up. Let me just quickly read Deep's question, Georg. So Georg, you mean that it is important to visualize the demands and factors that are challenging in order to build experiences to experience coherent work experiences?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the basic idea is that each individual, as now also we heard in the discussion, is perceiving working life a little bit differently. I mean, I'm standing here, probably experience that situation differently if Gwendoline or someone else would stand here right now. But still, there is a lot of commonality. I mean, we do know, I mean, we did studies across so huge companies, across all hierarchical level, and there are always commonalities that always people suffer from time pressure, from unclear roles, lack of getting feedback. That's so common for many of us. And then the basic idea is that when you, for example, run a survey or focus group and really share this perception across many different people, across many different employees, then suddenly people say, oh, it's not only me who is having this high demands and high time pressure and lack of supervisor feedback, but it's really true for most of us in my team. And then suddenly it becomes a shared reality where we can also jointly improve the situation. I think this is why it's so important to make it visible, how people experience their working life on an everyday basis, to make it something we can collectively observe and also collectively deal with and improve. That's the basic idea. And what I meant with this narrative, I mean, when you talk about the simple model of demands and resources, this is really something everyone can understand. And we had really experiences in really even financing companies and like a bank, that they suddenly, when they took decisions on a strategic level, they always were reflecting how does that influence the demands and resources of our employees. So it becomes a narrative and an additional criterion when they take decisions beyond just financial outcomes. This is why it needs to be such a simple narrative everyone can identify.
Thank you, Georg. That was very insightful. I know there are 2 more questions there. Just wanted to let you all know that we're supposed to have some reflection. We wanted to give you some questions and all that, but I think probably team is learning, a group is learning more by asking questions and clarifying. So we are perfectly okay with that. So get your questions coming. So Julia, over to you. Sorry for waiting for that long.
I had a very quick question. Could we study the political determinant of health in the framework of salutogenesis? Is it correct for you?
Sorry, I didn't understand well.
Julia, can you type your question? Maybe that'll be better.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Meanwhile, sorry, Maria, do you want to share your question?
Thank you. I would like to reflect on what you have just spoken about, this group approach to salutogenesis and how important this is on this level, because people usually find these things in common and have more motivation for modification of their own approach. And this would maybe be important since I work in a clinical setting, and group therapy is very important, especially for adolescents and young adults. So would you think that it is important to have this group approach to salutogenesis, not only in horizontal way, but also on a vertical way in terms of through between generations, and that maybe all professionals that get in contact with families may try to have this similar narrative that includes salutogenic promoting keywords, as I can say, so that maybe there's an influence with the right narrative since the beginning of life, and for the parents to know how to vertically influence their children in a good way.
Yeah, so if I understand you correctly, your idea would be that the same narrative could be started very early on already when a child develops from early stages, that you are not having such a, let's say, a deficit focus and only looking at the things which do not work well, but much more strength or asset focus. What are really the capabilities of the child you really can develop well and that can really thrive in the future. And I think certainly that's a narrative which plays out very nicely all during life. We had very lengthy discussions in the previous section when we talked about dementia and how to prevent it. And exactly where we had the same point, but often when we look at elderly people at the very end of life, we only look what's not going good anymore and what are all the deficits and all this deterioration of health, basically. But besides developing dementia, there are a lot of things which people still value and find important in their life, and where you can engage in the dialogue, absolutely. And this idea of doing it across generations, I would need to think about it, how one would do that. But interesting idea.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. I work with women and children, special children. I'm thinking of developing this idea with grandparents and parents. So that's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so Georg, I'm going to write Julia's question. How could we study political determinants of health in the salutogenesis framework?
Interesting question. I mean, we would probably need to reflect what we mean by political determinants. I mean, first of all, Antonovsky, also when you look at the levels of general resistance resources, as he called it, he said it goes all the way from even let's say, body level, organic level, all the way to society as a whole, even all the way to political determinants. I mean, if I would look at political determinants, I would again show which policies rather make it likely that people can really develop resources, that people have a more participatory role in society and can self-determine what they consider as healthy and really pursue the health as they define it for themselves. Because as we discussed earlier, Julia, I think it's very different what is important to elderly people, as it is true for every life stage, as Maria said, that we value different things differently. And that is really important to capture. So anyway, my recommendation would look at policies if they allow that people can more individually and clearly define what is important to them, and that they can proactively participate in good policy development and particular implementation. Maybe a negative example is exactly the COVID-19 crisis, where there have been a lot of requirements that people need to do, like getting vaccinated, and there was very, very little participatory approaches to that. So when governments were just not happy that people don't get vaccinated instead of getting them involved. Why don't you want to not be vaccinated? What can we do in order to improve this situation? So participation, participation, participation would be my answer.
Excellent. So I think Georg need a little bit of a break, and Gwendolyn has asked a question. He's been talking. I think you should get some water. We're going to do a discussion on what Gwendolyn has asked. SOC is presented as an attitude, which is sense of coherence. Those who are new to this, is an attitude towards stress. Do you think, we call it SOC, can only be developed through stressors? Sense of coherence, is this only be developed through stressors? So you've been hearing from Georg. Anyone want to comment other than Georg first? Give him a bit of a break. Julia, you was with us. Yes, I was waiting for you to answer. Yes.
We decided flexibly at the first part of this session that it's not about stress only. You could consider any biological, social, political, commercial mechanism which could maintain and sustain health, which could contribute to maintaining and sustaining of health. It's my comprehension.
Julia, you learn it very well. Okay, Gwendolyn, did you get that? I know there's a little bit of a connection issue there. So Georg, if you're ready, maybe you want to share your wisdom nuggets here.
Absolutely. I mean, let's look back at this original model of salutogenesis. Besides sense of coherent, we have this coherent life experiences. And within that, again, we have, I come back to that, participation at the very bottom, which will develop meaningfulness. So that's by itself a very strong resource, participation and being actively involved in decision making. On the middle level, we do have this load balance, a balance between stresses and resources. Again, resources play a huge role for this load balance. And we have this consistency Again, I consider that also as a resource when you have good narratives and a good understanding for yourself, and also within the company, a shared understanding what a healthy company is about. Again, it's a strong resource. So for me, it's all about resources, and stresses are just also reality, which are, anyway. Resources are much more important. And actually we did research, we really showed empirically, longitudinally, that strong job resources, a good resourceful work environment, is also increasing ZOC, sense of coherence, and positive health outcomes, not only stresses or demands.
Excellent. And David has shared very kindly. David, probably you want to share about it?
Yeah, it's just that if anyone's interested in the role of information, which is my particular, you mentioned resources. I think having information that's timely, that's meaningful, is absolutely critical. It's just a piece that I wrote for the with the NHS in the UK for the Global Social Prescribing Alliance. So it's there if anyone's interested.
Great, thanks a lot.
I appreciate much. Any other questions?
Could I briefly respond to Georg's response to my question? Because I completely agree with your ideas about that resources are also influencing the growth or strengthening of the sense of coherence. And I think in my research, the input was not the stress factors, indeed. And it's a kind of a conflict in my head that I think salutogenesis is about positive health and assets and an asset approach. And the fact that you're thinking about stresses is actually going back to the deficit approach. So I'm trying to juggle that in my head, how that makes sense to focus on stresses when you're trying to focus on assets and salutogenesis instead of pathogenesis and deficits.
I mean, my answer would be also what I introduced earlier with this balance idea, that life also, I never ever wanted to make the impression that there is not also this dangerous river of life. I would suggest that we just acknowledge there are always both sides happening parallel. So I'm currently working, I call it, well, I'm still struggling if I call it as a completed model of salutogenesis or a dual health development model, which I actually prefer, because it makes it very clear that on the one hand, you do have the stressors, and if you have too many of the stressors, this will lead to disease. And on the other hand, you do have these resourceful aspects in life, which will lead you to thriving. And both is happening in parallel. And more specifically, if there's certainly costs and interaction going on. So if you have strong resources, this helps you also to overcome the stresses, so you will develop less disease. So my recommendation is not an either or, but always a combined dual approach, because this is just reflecting our life. Always both things are happening simultaneously.
Excellent, very powerful. I saw so many nods on that, Georg. Any other
maybe,
questions?
sorry, I just add something here from my experience also in context of organizations. I mean, there is required in Europe, on a European level, it's required to do psychosocial risk assessments, which conveys a job and psychosocial factors at work are a risk. So which means when you work, it's a risk. So better don't work. I mean, how ridiculous is that? And when there are others, they're only running high energy programs in companies or high engagement programs. That's similarly ridiculous, because you cannot always be highly engaged and highly energetic, because there is also stress. So this is why we came to this conclusion, use a balanced approach, because that's much more meaningful to people, because they always make these two experiences simultaneously. Certainly sometimes we are really stressed and forget about the positive side. Sometimes it's the other way around, but look at both sides.
Excellent. So we have about 60 seconds left. Any final burning questions before the room is closed automatically, and we'll be in the middle center room.
Okay. Good. May I just start on the top that you shortly present yourself and tell what links you to this workshop, what links you to the topic, what inspired you to choose this topic, and what you would like to have out from this workshop. So who are you? Why are you here? And what do you want to have when you leave this workshop? Okay. Elizabeth, please.
Good afternoon. From my part of the world currently, my name is, as you can see, Elizabeth. I come from a management background and studied health sciences on top of it because I wanted to understand better how to promote the health of people who are working. So my focus is the work setting. And what really triggered me was what you mentioned in the presentation of this workshop, the word coherent, because I thought, you know, you can have coherent experiences in any setting that are bad. And you can have coherent experiences that are good. And that's the ones that we are striving for. And that's the ones that we would want to see more of. But to realize that it can be coherent and bad was really good. So that's why I opted for this one.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Gita, please.
Hello. Can you hear me? Yes. I have a dog snoring here behind me, but I hope it's not interfering the sound. Thank you for organizing this this seminar conference. And what did you say I was going to do? My topics are nature and well-being from this salutogenesis perspective. Now I have gone to this more to this culture thing, and that's the reason why I choose this workshop, because the society and the culture, and I like to get some inspiration from this workshop. Yes, that was short. Thank you.
Thank you, Gita. Maybe you can explain afterwards a bit more about your linkage of nature and culture. We will need a bit more background for this to discuss your topic.
Yeah.
But first, maybe we go on with Annemarie, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Annemarie Magistretti from the Netherlands. I'm associate professor at the Health and Society department.
Sorry, Annemarie, you're hard to understand. Could you move closer to your mic? Your voice is very not loud enough. Sorry.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. My name is Annemarie Magistretti. I'm associate professor Health and Society, Wageningen University. And in the past, I did several projects in which we also used the sense of coherence, especially the SOC3 questionnaire, because it is very short. And we discovered, for example, that SOC can be increased, especially among people with a low socioeconomic position, by doing health promotion programs. And that's mainly related to, we think, empowerment and sharing stories with each other, that kind of things. And now I'm also interested in looking at more the community and society measurement of a sense of coherence, and also how to increase. And that's why I joined this workshop, that it is about more coherent societies. And I'm also interested in, is that also related to more resilient societies? So the concept of resilience, I'm also interested in.
Thank you very much. Sorry, how do you spell your name? Breakout? Sorry, we cannot hear you. Maybe you're muted. Could this be?
I think you're muted, yeah.
Sometimes it's on your computer. Yeah, good. That's good. Okay. So you will present yourself as soon as the sound will work. Good. We promised that we start with your question. And maybe I start where you started to talk, Elizabeth. What is coherent? A coherent experience, and what happens when people make coherent but bad experiences? Sort of when we use Georg's picture, when they are in a river where it's very hard to swim. And I don't know who would like to tell a bit more. Maybe you, Elizabeth, could tell us more what you connect to your question, what examples you're thinking of.
Well, I guess, basically struck by the idea that something that's coined positively in the concept of salutogenesis is, or has to be checked in reality. Namely, coherence is something good in the concept, but we could, for example, any of us, I guess, has already made the experience or heard of it, that you have a bad situation in the workplace and you can't improve it, and you make the same experience over and over. So that would be a coherent experience, but you couldn't change it. And of course, that would lead to change your thinking about the situation. It would make you feel much less empowered and perhaps even helpless. Would reduce your sense of coherence, even though you have an element that's absolutely coherent, and would maybe even make sense because of the structure of the situation. So it might be that the answer to my question is that the elements leading to, or the experiences leading to the elements of the sense of coherence, they need to be positive as well. And that's the question then, maybe that's really behind it. The research that Antonovsky conducted showed him that even these bad experiences that these women had in the Holocaust, which were of course also negative, that they too could promote something that strengthened them. And I guess I have difficulties turning my mind around that at the moment.
And I think I know what you mean, and I would have an answer, but I would like to open the discussion now.
Okay, welcome back. I hope you can hear me. Okay, very good. So now we had very interesting, intense discussions within our 5 sub-themes. Certainly you only had the opportunity to listen to 2 of them, or not listen, be part of, and hopefully also spoke in 2 of them. Please be aware that we hopefully recorded most also of the sub-sessions. So you will be able to also watch them later on online on our Star Society. I will present that at the very end. Now we do have time for a 2-minute short summary from each group, and please stick to this 2 minutes because we don't want to keep people not longer than indicated originally in our pre-conference. We have 2 minutes each. And so group number 1, please start with 2 minutes.
Okay, so we had very interesting discussion about the philosophical question of the collective level of sense of coherence, and a deeper conversation about ways it might be measured. Several participants agree that the most likely measurement would be the individual perception of the collective level of sense of coherence, family, community, or nation. We also discussed about the relationship between individual and collective sense of coherence, and we talked about the importance of the cultural and social context in which we conducted the research. And thank you very much for everyone who participated.
Wow, that was very concise. Thanks a lot, Ali. That was a good example now. Group number 2, please.
Thank you. So we also have 2 very rich sessions. We talk about a lot of things. What I retained the most, maybe it was just my personal input, but what I retained the most, it's when we talk about the place of nature and culture to build coherent societies. For some people who are more closer to the nature in terms of environment, they will experience positive experiences, and this will increase the SOC. And cultural ties can also help to strengthen the SOC. When people move in new settings, they can lose a part of their SOC, so they're gonna have to find other resources to increase it. So that was interesting for me. We also talk about the SOC of the communities, which serves to create coherent societies. And this leads us to highlight the differences between the SOC of the communities and the SOC of the society. We also talk about social participation, neighborhoods, and social ties to create more welcoming and benevolent societies. We also refer to the different meanings of a sense of coherence for different groups in the same society. And I particularly like when someone highlight some equity issues in comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. So that were the 5 things I want to highlight.
Great, thanks a lot also for being very concise and very interesting. So there's a range you covered in that short period of time. Amazing. Okay.
Yes, I'm group 3, Bengt here. We were trying to explore the genesis of salutogenesis and asking the people who were in the group to go back to their first memories in life. And I realized when we looked at these memories, we analyzed them a bit where we would have need a 3-week time to analyze them. But anyway, we actually saw that these were connected to meaning, and these were strongly connected to social context. And it was really what I expected, but I had hoped we would have more time to get it. But anyway, we got an idea of where we are going. Some expression in writing, some expressed in word, and some expressed it in a dimension we don't know yet. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot for digging into this very origin of salutogenesis, and certainly it's something each of us can maybe make this journey back and see where the own origin of salutogenesis is. Thanks. Group number 4, we are already.
We had 4. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So hi. Thank you very much for your very active participation. We had 2 very rich sessions. As the other sessions, we were working on the topic, as you know, health beyond ease and individual. So I was asking Georg actually before this, I was panicking what I'm going to share because it was such a rich discussion and key points, everything was key, but was shared. But I think what I can summarize what the 2 discussions, or rather the 2 sessions we had, was development of interventions, involvement of individual or collective at the society level, and also how we can enhance the positive health. So few things which was still resonating and ringing in my head very fresh is when Georg actually put it in a keywords, for example, participation. That before we develop anything, before we feel that anything would work, for a positive health outcomes, it's important that we hear from the individuals and the societies. let them participate before we decide what should be done. And he gave a very good example of COVID and then vaccination, where the participation from the society was very less and mostly coming from the government. So that was one example. I know I need to stick to the time. And the second thing, which was very important, was that we should not just focus, and not really should not, but there was a lot of discussion that, how we can engage individuals and also the community. So there was some rich discussion around it. So you have to stay tuned and listen to our recording to see what was going on in our, subsection 4. And lastly, I think something which was very interesting, and I am gonna think and ponder on further, is that in order to enhance positive health, can we don't just focus horizontally? I'm going to use the exact words which was shared by the participant, and we look through, for example, generations. Can it be, cultivated as such and then pass on to next generation? So like what Bengt said, going back, we also want to see how we can go from generation to generations. Thank you. Over to you, Georg.
Great, thanks a lot. Very good summary, very rich for that short time you had. Now to the last group.
Yes, so the group, the topic number 5 was looking at salutogenesis guiding health promotion action. So we had to start 3 presentations, one by Luis, me, myself, and the second one by Eva, and then by Marguerite. And the 3 presentations started the discussion. In the first slot, we could not finalize it, so we took the second slot. But mainly, what we could say is that we are in need of more guiding actions or applications on how salutogenesis can really activate the health promotion agenda. And so Marguerite brought us an example from Africa, where the very interesting approach to deal with youth losses was followed by her, and the research showed that the approach by salutogenic perspective could be really triggering. Eva also presented a very interesting perspective, and some of the audience members made very interesting questions again. So we are just starting, I would say, something on this topic here, and I hope that we can continue this further on.
Great, thanks a lot, Luis. I think, as you say, I think this whole field of interventions still can learn a lot from salutogenesis, and so we hope that our sessions today also help to boost thinking and acting in this direction. Now, the big question is, what would Antonovsky say hearing all that? And there were some people also in our group who always said, is that still in line with salutogenesis? Then Shifra, I dare to say what you always tell me, because Shifra, I should say, she is this great person in our group who has this most close link to Antonovsky and his thinking, because she was the only, actually, as a no PhD student of Aaron Antonovsky, and certainly co-developed with him this whole concept. So it's always good to have her as a kind of reference person. Are we still in line or not? And even if not, maybe it's not such a problem. So let's hear from Shifra. What would Antonovsky say with all that what we discussed today?
Wow, what a question. What would Aaron Antonovsky say? So if I pass the 5 minutes, you can stop me. So being the only doctoral student of Aaron Antonovsky, this question is asked very often by my colleagues, by you, as well as by old and newcomer salutogenic researchers. Actually, I'm deeply honored by this request, but I'm also very confused by it. Aaron was my inspiring teacher and later on a very stimulating colleague who changed my way of thinking. He indeed taught me how to think, but he never told me what to think. So can I answer your question? What would Aaron Antonovsky would say? I'll try to do it in the spirit of my mentor and according to some talks that I had with him lately in my dreams. First, I believe that Aaron would have no idea how salutogenesis will continue to be developed. Even in the best of his dreams, not mine, would he imagine that almost 30 years after he passed away, salutogenesis would become more than a new paradigm in social sciences and medicine. I feel that it became something more than this. Can I say a social movement towards a salutogenic world? For this development, I have to thank my friends here in this group of salutogenesis, and especially to you, Bengt, that with your enthusiasm and compassion really pushed this movement from the beginning. Moreover, Aaron could not have imagined that international conferences would be conducted on topics within this paradigm, and that so many papers and 2 editions of the Handbook of Salutogenesis would be published. Salutogenesis is no longer the strict and clear theory of Aaron that he left to us about moving towards health, but much more than this. Thus, salutogenesis for me now is asking salutogenic questions beyond health. This was the topic of this meeting, and is even employing other salutogenic concepts rather than only the sense of coherence, and to seek answers to salutogenic questions. This was indeed the wonderful spirit, I must admit, of today's plenary, asking new questions, looking for new directions, suggesting new ways of thinking salutogenically. So what would Aaron say about these new directions? I'm sure maybe he will be angry because it's not strict to his idea, but I'm sure he would be delighted with how it turned out. After all, he didn't think of his theory as a perfect model of how things were. He saw it as just a beginning and hoped it would be a fruitful start. So this meeting today was really a valuable continuation, part of the progress. Some new questions were asked, and I'm glad for this. Questions that were not asked before. And these questions reflect a new view of the salutogenic paradigm. And you know that I told you many times that Aaron used to tell us, his students, that it is the question that the scientist asks that advances science far more than the answer. I'm not sure, Georg and your group, about the question that you raised and you asked. You know, we have a song in Hebrew, here is not Europe, here is chaos, and you know, the world here, in the place where we live is chaotic, and here is not Europe. So the question about the basic philosophical assumption of salutogenesis about the world, I'm not sure about this, that he will accept this, because he based his theory on this assumption, philosophical assumption, about the normal state of human organism. That the normal state is of entropy, of disorder, of disruption of the homeostasis. And he used to tell me this, as I was then a mother of 2 children. Now I have grandchildren, but they were children then. and juggled between family work, PhD studies, and some works together. And he said to me that anyone who has ever raised a child knows at a gut level what is entropy as a basic state of the world. So I think that your question, he would not accept this question about this basic assumption of him, which is based on his life. And I trust that this was the only assumption that was not unquestionable for him. Anyway. Overall, I trust that Aaron Antonovsky would encourage us to continue this progress today towards new creative ways of asking and studying salutogenesis. After all, he wrote, and I quote his last paper that I've heard today also, it is wise to see models, theories, constructs, hypotheses, and even ideas as heuristic devices, not as holy truths. And coming back to my talks with Aaron in my dreams, as I told you, I also ask him, what is happening to our world these days? How is it that we are moving away from peace, away from social justice, away from equality, away from tolerance and openness to the other? For this question, I don't get good answers from him. I can tell you that Aaron was a real authentic idealist with a strong commitment to his ideals of peace, equality, and democracy. He was not only a prominent scientist in the world, but an active figure in the left-wing struggle in Israel. Actually, we first met in this circus of peace activists before he became my academic mentor. And it was much strong connection between us about these problems of the world and view of the world. So our last meeting outside the hospital was in an exciting event near Gaza after the Rabin-Arafat meeting during the Oslo Accord between Palestinians and Israeli. And we both were very excited to release the white balloons towards Gaza as a symbol of peace and to hear some peace bells. But at just this hopeful point, Aaron left the world. And remained it to us to deal with where the world is going now. And we all know about what happened for the brave step of Rabin and how it has ended. So we have been left with no answer for these crucial questions. I'm sorry about it, we don't have answer about the state of our violent, conflictual world. Not only in my place where we live, Adi and Sharon and I in Israel, but also other places in the world today in Europe, and I mean to Ukraine. But I will conclude, how else, with Aaron's daily words that I heard from him. Clearly and delightfully, there is much more to be done. Go to work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Shifra. This was certainly a very thorough reflection out of your own perspective and that of Aaron Antonovsky. And we really appreciate his last thoughts, I think you shared here with us. I mean, I don't have the time and would not dare to now reply that you question my attempt to also expand the salutogenic model. Maybe I'm just saying one word. I mean, there is this big concept of pathogenesis, which is just focusing on one side of life. And then there's this huge concept of salutogenesis, which is really about the positive side of life also. And so I think we could use that in this dual way, still certainly acknowledging there is a lot of conflict, there is a lot of stress and even war and all that, but still there are also other aspects in life. And we should aim for balancing that in a better way, getting rid of unnecessary conflict and really improve this more positive side of life. But anyway, that's my perspective, and certainly currently we do have quite challenging times, and I wish you all the best with these very difficult times. But now I still need to say two things. First, I need to apologize because Pauline was supposed to moderate the end of the session, but we lost her because she has some internet issues in her country. So this is why I'm standing here. And the last thing I would just now like to share before we say goodbye is just to see, let's see. What you can do when you want to hear more about salutogenesis and continue this discussion. Those of you who have registered to the IUHPE World Conference starting tonight, actually, please go to this workshop on salutogenesis and health literacy, where we really explore how these two concepts can complement each other to contribute to more equitable policy making. It's happening on Monday. And we do have a really very rich sub-plenary on salutogenesis, again, about achieving social justice through socially coherent policy and practice, really digging much more deeply as we could today, really into this question, how to move this concept to this society level. And we do have a roundtable on salutogenesis around new developments of the sense of coherence. And last but not least, the workshop on the sense for coherence. Still a lot of opportunities here to learn more about salutogenesis. And finally, there's this handbook. The first edition was downloaded 2.3 million times. Can you imagine? I mean, chapters of the whole handbook, so many distribution we achieved. And now there's the second handbook out there. You can learn a lot. It's open access, so you can download it for free. And besides this handbook, we started the STAR Society, the Society for Theory and Research in Salutogenesis in 2017, where you can join for free. Then you will get access to the recordings of today's session. You will hear about newest publications, will have access to the soft skills. There's a discussion forum where you can post your questions. Also, if you have follow-up questions, what we discussed today, please go there. That's it from my side. And with that, I'm now also in the position to say goodbye to everyone. Thanks a lot for joining, even on a Sunday evening or whatever the time was at your place. We really appreciate that. And again, I learned a lot with this very rich discussions we had, also in the subgroups. Thanks a lot. And yeah, please stay tuned to salutogenesis and help us to make this concept even more meaningful.
Okay. Good. May I just start on the top, that you shortly present yourself and tell what links you to this workshop, what links you to the topic, what inspired you to choose this topic, and what you would like to